Following the capture and kill of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel leader, El Mencho, a new leader has been erected into place, and he's an American citizen. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of Borderland Dispatches, an Ironclad original with yours truly, Katarina Schultz.
The opinions of the guests and host are their own and do not represent the opinions of Ironclad, the Border Patrol, or the Department of Homeland Security.
Juan Carlos Valencia Gonzalez, or El 03, El 03 in Spanish. I know some of you get triggered when I speak Spanish. Has officially been identified as the new leader of CJNG. He is El Mencho's stepson, and as per his last name, comes from the infamously powerful Valencia family of Mexico. So I'm going to walk you through how this is kind of shaping the organization and what led to his ascent to kind of easily, in a way, take over this role, because as you guys have seen, the transition of power has been pretty seamless. The US is offering up to $5 million for information that leads to the capture of El 03. So he's already, obviously, for a while actually, been on the US most wanted list. His priority will likely grow over time. But there's kind of three core pillars within CJNG that can explain what led to the rise of Cerot. This ties back to his biological father's lineage, tied to the Millennial Cartel from the 70s and 80s, and the financial networks of Los Queenies, led by the Valencia family, who now basically run CJNG. I mean, they were the financial backing behind the brutal cartel since the beginning. But now this kind of means something different. The Millennial Cartel, I'm going to give you guys some context. I've spoken about this before, and I know some of you know about it. Some of you had questions, and this was kind of new information in a way. But the Millennial Cartel, also known as Los Valencia, the Valencias, started in Michoacan in the 1970s. And they started because they kind of pivoted from agriculture, avocado trade to the drug trade. There's key leaders here, okay? There's Emilio Valencia Barragan, Emilio Valencia Mendoza, and Luis Valencia. And then especially Armando Valencia Cornelio. He went by El Maradona or El Juanito. Now, Armando is the biological father of Cerot, the new leader of CJNG. Under his leadership, under his father's leadership, is how the Valencia family transitioned from the avocado trade into one of the key operators of the international drug trade. They basically started with marijuana and poppy cultivation. We're really throwing it back to the 70s and 80s. And this was the clan that strengthened or kind of grew those ties with the Colombian network. And really, in a way, started trafficking cocaine through their Colombian counterparts. So the Millennial Cartel established ties with the Juarez cartel, the Medellin cartel, and then obviously later the Sinaloa cartel. This is clearly one of the oldest cartels. And so the idea that this sort of same leadership, or at least family ties, is now leading the most powerful cartel in Mexico, the CJNG, doesn't really come as a surprise. But I think it's important context for everyone to have that's following this. This was also supported by key figures like Amado Carrillo Fuentes, I get a lot of questions about him a lot, El Señor de los Cielos. Armando Valencia, though, built trafficking routes that allowed the group to control the entry of roughly 1/3 of cocaine into the United States. So there was a significant impact here all the way back to the Millennial Cartel. As you guys know, actually, Amado's brother, Vicente, is in U.S. custody. He was transferred from Mexican to U.S. custody in 2025, last year, part of those major fugitive transfers from Mexico to the U.S. During this time, the group essentially masked their drug trafficking through the avocado trade, which they were already initially heavily involved in. Actually, like, they were called the Avocado Kings during a specific time. And it wasn't until his brothers and nephews, Armando's brothers and nephews, created Los Queenies that this really took on a whole new life. Los Queenies, like I said, are now essentially in charge of CJNG. Now, this is really interesting because, I mean, this is the most of the questions I get is, about U.S. intervention here. And it's important to note that Valencia Cornelio was also the direct superior of El Mencho during like the early years of CJNG, which kind of became like the criminal school of the future of CJNG. But the U.S. Department of Justice held Armando responsible for moving up to 1/3 of the cocaine entering the United States. He was arrested in 2003 in Jalisco. He was then extradited, and then was released in 2020, like over citations of like health conditions. But he was officially extradited under the extradition treaty. This wasn't a fugitive transfer. These transfers that we're seeing didn't really exist at all in 2003. And then there was this defining moment in 2009, okay, where there was a split between the Millennial Cartel, between the faction that was led by El Mencho and Eric Valencia, who goes by El 85, the 85. This rupture is what essentially created CJNG, okay? And it wouldn't have been able to do so. Mencho would not have been successful with this if it wasn't for the funding from the Valencia family and his sort of narco school during his millennial years.
Hi, everybody. This episode is brought to you by our partners at GHOSTBED, and today I'm actually sitting down with its founder, Mark Warner, to talk about the story behind their brand and why they're all in on all of us getting better sleep.
I've had 3 neck surgeries over the past 27 years, and so I couldn't find a pillow or mattress that worked for me. And so I ended up having to invent my own. I took great care in it so it would take care of my problems. And then I also sleep warm, so I invented a lot of cooling technologies and got a number of patents on that kind of technology. So that was the origin of the purpose. But I wanted to start it with my wife and then my kids as a family business. So my grandfather, after World War I, he started the Werner Company, which ultimately became Werner Ladder. And then my dad invented the aluminum ladder, the machines to make it, and then he invented the fiberglass ladder and fiberglass and the machines to make that. So I was reared in that environment of quality, engineering, inventing, all that kind of stuff. And I grew up in that. So when I was starting GHOSTBED and making my own memory foam pillows and mattress, that was my kind of history and allowed me to kind of really make a very quality product. And that's really how we got started. And we're all about high quality at an affordable price. So for all of our Ironclad viewers, we have a special offer. So you go to ghostbed.com/ironclad, and we're giving an extra 15% off, which is a really big discount on already low prices. To come to GHOSTBED, take advantage of that special pricing with Ironclad, and enjoy a GHOSTBED mattress and other products.
What we do at Ironclad doesn't happen by accident. It exists because a small number of brands choose to stand behind us. These are brands that believe in the same things we do: craftsmanship, independence, and building something real that lasts. Norwood Sawmills is one of those brands. They believe in the people behind the network, the builders, the landowners, the doers, and the craftsmen who value control over their work and pride in how it's done. That alignment matters to us, and it's why we're proud to stand with them. Norwood Sawmills designs portable sawmills that give you the ability to make your own lumber on your land, on your timeline, without sacrificing quality or performance. For over 30 years, they've been building equipment that's engineered to last and designed to grow with you, whether you're a serious DIY builder or a professional sawyer. If you care about quality, if you care about independence, and if you're considering investing in your land, your projects, your long-term capability, Norwood is worth your time. We encourage you to support the brands that support this network. To learn more, explore their portable sawmills and talk directly to their team at norwoodsawmills.com.
Los Queenies, which is direct lineage from that Valencia Gonzalez family, is considered to be one of the most powerful drug trafficking organizations by the DEA. And the leader of Los Queenies is the uncle of the new leader of CJNG, okay? Abigail Gonzalez Valencia, or El Queenie, is literally El Cerot's uncle. The organization specialized mostly in cocaine trafficking, meth trafficking, and specialized in routes across, obviously, the US, Europe, Asia, globally. Typically, this is how these routes and connections give way to more networking for future generations of factions, cartels, and leaders. Los Queenies are considered the richest drug traffickers globally, essentially. They surpass billions of dollars in profits every year. And they even surpass the profits of the Sinaloa cartel. So this Gonzalez Valencia family is very large, okay? It consists of 18 siblings. They immigrated to California in the 80s, as did El Mencho. El Mencho ends up marrying one of the siblings, Rosalinda Valencia, who we know was arrested in Mexico, was then set free, is allegedly in custody, but then is not. It's a big mess, but with so much money, it only makes sense, truth be told. Now, so how did this work? The direct sibling connection between Rosalinda and Abigail, okay, the leader of Los Queenies, El Queenie, and Rosalinda's subsequent marriage to El Mencho essentially solidified this stronghold that this family has over drug trafficking, not only in Mexico, but transnationally. And so this is why when people ask me, how did CJNG grow so rapidly and so aggressively? Because it didn't start from zero. It didn't start from nothing. Okay, there were such strong family ties to a group that had been drug trafficking for so long and profiting off of it so exponentially. So the resources, the power, the muscle, and the money, most importantly, and the roots were all there for El Mencho to take this information, to apply his methodology, to use the finances, and create one of the most violent and expansionist cartels in Mexico that we know today as CJNG. So El Mencho's stepson, El Cerot, was essentially trained and taught how to become a kingpin since he was a child. I'm under the impression that Cerot was literally entrusted with the role of successor of CJNG for years, which is why I don't think there has been any infighting so far. And we haven't seen the same type of fragmentation that we typically see when the kingpin strategy is applied. And that's because Cerot had already gained this sort of loyal following and understanding throughout the organization that if his stepfather were to die or be taken out like he was, he would then step up and be the new kingpin, be the leader. And everyone, or mostly everyone, that needed to be accepting of this understanding was they knew, okay, Mencho and Rosalinda had trained Cerot and prepared him to take on this kingpin role. What were they going to do? He's been incredibly powerful, and I'm sure, I mean, I've never met him, but I'm sure that with that type of power and responsibility being entrusted onto you from such a young age and growing up in that family dynamic, you have a sense of invincibility. Perhaps that isn't the best word to explain it, but there would be a sense of power, of course, knowing that you are the designated leader of one of the most infamous cartels. You come from such a strong, powerful, rich family who's had their hands in drug trafficking transnationally for decades, since the beginning of drug trafficking time, essentially. So I think this plays a major role, and also why the decision that he was chosen to be the leader, and it was so quick, because there was this understanding that the organization wouldn't collapse in on itself. People accepted this and people understood this for a very long time. El Cerot was born in the United States, in California, and he actually, it was interesting because when we were kind of predicting or chatting about who could be a possible leader of CJNG, he was one of my top options. And a lot of people were under the impression that it could be someone else. And a lot of people, this was kind of their first time hearing about him. I mean, I don't know. I guess it depends how much of this you're following, but he actually emerged on this sort of international drug trafficker stage in like 2021 when a federal court in Washington, D.C. issued an indictment charging him with drug trafficking and firearms offenses. He obviously still, I mean, he's one of the most wanted people. And according to U.S. authorities, Cerot conspired since 2007, so we're going way back again, to import more than 5 kilos of cocaine and more than, 500 grams or over that of meth into the U.S. This was actually part of that DEA operation in L.A. called Pinky and Cerebro. I think I've dived into this on previous episodes before, but the U.S. Department is offering a $5 million reward for information leading to his capture, and I'm sure that that reward over time will increase. I mean, it really begs the question, what was the U.S. expecting when they took out or tried to capture unsuccessfully, ended up in killing him? What were they expecting with taking out El Mencho as the kingpin? Okay, the stepson was already on the radar since 2007. He's essentially been taught and trained for this position since he was a child. I do have to say one thing. For the people of Mexico, I'm very happy that this was more or less a responsible, a sort of calm transition of power. Of course, I know chaos was unleashed and I know chaos occurs, but considering the context of the drug trafficking environment of Mexico, it was a pretty peaceful transition of power. And so for the people of Mexico, that makes me happy, because here violence is absolutely over the top. But when we're looking at it from the US perspective, and I know most of you are, it really begs the question of how effective the El Mencho operation really was in the long term. Really is in the long term. Because if we have a new kingpin who knows the rule book probably better than anyone, then we'll never see the end of CJNG. And isn't that the goal for the United States, for this administration? It'll be interesting to see what happens. Of course, his dual citizenship, Mexico and U.S. nationality, complicates the efforts to apprehend him, because he is protected under U.S. constitutional law, and U.S. law requires specific authorization for operations targeting American citizens abroad. I'm sure Mexico will cooperate, just like they cooperated with and Mencho, and likely cooperated with Ryan Wedding. Ryan Wedding was not Mexican, but he was also not American, and Mencho was Mexican. So this will be interesting to see. This is really the first kingpin that we've seen take on such a large role with American citizenship. There have been other major narcos, of course, but certainly not to the level of being the leader, the kingpin of CJNG. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of Borderland Dispatches, an Ironclad original with yours truly, Katarina Schultz. As always, see you next time.